Hello, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hey, my name is Kat. If you're not new here, hello. As you can see, my hair is blue now. Perhaps in honor of Captain America, who is the subject of today's review, and maybe not. But let's go with yes. Also, I'm filming during the day, which is hella annoying. Right, so we are talking about Captain America today. It's happening, and we're gonna cover both the first two Captain America films, The First Avenger and Winter Soldier. I've already made a video on the Civil War film, which you can click or tap right there to watch right now, or just watch it later after you've watched all of this. Are very interesting because they're very different. From the first one to the second one, there's a very big difference in tone and also in things in like color palettes. The soundtrack is different, and most importantly, I think it represents Steve's journey from innocence to experience. And I would argue that these two films are probably the most connected Marvel movies in a way, because you can't really have one without the other. Steve's journey is not complete with either of these counterparts. So let's break it down. In Captain America: The First Avenger, we get Captain America's origin story from his humble beginnings as a scrawny little kid in Brooklyn to Chris Evans. The key here is that the scrawny boy who gets transformed into the superhero is a man with a heart of gold. He is a hero within before his physique rises up to match him. It's probably one of my favorite things about the film when Stanley Tucci's character, who's the doctor who has come up with the serum that will make Captain America, he says it just amplifies whatever's already there. So if you're made of good stuff, it'll just bring that forward. And that's exactly what happens with Steve, and it's the exact opposite that happens to Red Skull, who's the main antagonist in the film, who is made of terrible stuff. He's a Nazi. He wants to kill and destroy. You know, you don't need me to explain fascism to you. It's awful, it's terrible, don't do it. Now, the film itself is very much a period piece. It's set in the 40s. The color palette is very 40s, and it works in the favor of this film. It very much follows the decade. It just makes it a really interesting film from a production design perspective, as well as set design and costumes as well. I would say this is the most different looking Marvel film set on Earth, because obviously things like Thor and Guardians of the Galaxy and things like that, they have their own kind of aesthetic. But all the other Marvel movies, and especially the ones we had until Captain America: The First Avenger came out, they all were set in pretty much like present day Earth. And so they had a certain look to them. But this one, by taking us back to the 40s, it just looks really good. Narratively as well, this film is super important. It introduces some key characters, obviously Captain America, but also people like Bucky Barnes and Peggy Carter, who is of course one of the founding members of S.H.I.E.L.D., as well as Steve's special friend, sort of. So it's very much a necessary movie in order to understand where all of the Avengers' key players come from. Even people like Tony Stark, we meet his father Howard in this film, and he's played brilliantly by Dominic Cooper. I actually really like his character here. Although one would argue he's very different to the Howard Stark that we got to know through the Iron Man movies, but that's neither here nor there at this point. Let's get back to Steve. Steve is such a wonderful character. He has such an unwavering sense of justice, and freedom is the most important thing for him. Probably in the purest sense of the word, he believes in that American ideal of we're all free. And his morals and his integrity are such bright beacons that he inspires people to follow him anywhere. Literally the American flag. Probably. It's a weird thing to say as a non-American. That's a separate story. We can come back to that. Now, what I find really interesting is that while there definitely is a story, a plot to the film, and Steve for sure undergoes a journey that kind of follows the kind of traditional hero's journey structure. I will leave a link in the description in case you want to look a little bit deeper into it. Steve definitely grows into his own identity, and by the end of the film has definitely developed into the kind of hero that Captain America is, the one that we know and love. Ooh, darkness. Ooh, it's coming right back up. So while Steve's journey ends in quite a satisfying, even if it's quite a tragic place, because he is forced to give up everything. As far as he's concerned, he's basically committing suicide, forfeiting any chance at a normal life, a chance at love with Peggy, a chance at seeing the world not at war. And that really cements him as a hero. Yet, I kind of get the sense that there's not a lot of change within this film for Steve himself. He starts off as a morally upstanding man. He morphs into a morally upstanding hero, punches a lot of Nazis in between, but he himself is the same person. Now, I'm not leveling this as a major criticism to the film. It's by no means a bad thing, because at this point, we needed to understand who Steve is, why he is Captain America, and what being Captain America means. Because in the first Avengers film, we need to understand where this guy has come from. And there's really no other way to do this than to give Steve a full-length film. But there was a lot of talk about how the first Captain America film is boring. And I get that, but I would argue there's a reason it felt like that to a lot of people, and that's because Steve's journey wasn't complete yet. Really, within this film, he faces little in the way of personal conflict and personal change. Like, yes, he does change physically, kick the crap out of some bad guys, loses his friend, falls in love, but then also loses the girl and also loses everything else. But he's the same goody two-shoes Steve from the beginning of the film. Where that changes and where Steve really undergoes some personal change is in Captain America: Winter Soldier. Now, the Winter Soldier movie came in after the first Avengers film, where we get a real sense of like who S.H.I.E.L.D. are. There is some dodgy business going on there, and a bunch of the Avengers don't trust them. Cap is the first one to say, wait, hang on a minute, what's going on here? But it's in this movie where Cap's blind faith in institutions is really tested. It's right here where his ideals, which really kind of represent the foundations that America was built on, maybe don't align with modern day America. And I find that so interesting for him, because he is the sort of hero that we are invited to believe in, and he is always on the side of the good guys. So when his own loyalty is tested and he starts to think that, hey, hang on a minute, maybe I shouldn't put my blind faith into these institutions or even in, America, whatever that means now, because maybe it's changed too much from what he knew, from what he believed in the 40s. And the very revelation that the bad guys have been in S.H.I.E.L.D. all along, that they have infiltrated it from the very beginning, and that right now S.H.I.E.L.D. is really more Hydra than it is S.H.I.E.L.D. That is the coolest plot twist, and also the biggest probably. It shakes things up within the MCU in such a way that everything that the first Avengers film kind of built on, the foundations are shaky now. And that, dramatically, is the most interesting thing. I mean, it's no surprise that this is one of the best received Marvel movies within the entire franchise. I think most people I know would put it right up the top with their favorite films. And I would say for me too, it's probably in my top 5 Marvel movies. And also I think it's a fantastic entry point for people who don't watch superhero movies, or for people who say they don't like superhero movies because they're silly, because this is basically a spy thriller, and it draws from the best sort of novels from the 70s. It has a real gritty, real vibe to it, and it presents the central character with a great moral quandary that maybe he shouldn't be putting his blind faith in the establishment. And yet, of course, it still has that larger-than-life element that makes watching superhero movies a lot of fun. Personally, I love Steve's journey in this film. I think he grows so much as a person when he confronts himself with the idea that everything he believed in might possibly be a lie. Before Winter Soldier, in the first Captain America film and the first Avengers film, I really liked Steve, but this movie made me love him. He is now absolutely one of my favorite Avengers, if not my favorite Avenger. Yeah, more than Thor. I love that he is, the man out of time who has to always reconcile himself with all the things that he has missed because he was on ice. Like the opening scene where he meets Sam, and Sam mentions an album and he jots it down in his list of things to check out. It's just really one of my favorite tropes, probably, in kind of speculative fiction. The guy who, you know, has missed some decades and has to, like, catch up with the world. I love that. And it also gives him lots to unpack when he finds out that his best friend Bucky is actually still alive and actually has been brainwashed by the bad guys, and he has been put on ice and then brought back lots of times. It's just a really bad deal. Poor Bucky, man. Like, it breaks my heart that Bucky has gone through all of this. And of course, when Steve is faced with Bucky for the first time, it's like, wait, hey, you're my best friend, and also you're alive? My god, everyone I know is dead. Or almost dead. Pretty much, everybody's dead. But then Bucky doesn't remember him, or maybe he does, and it's like this whole thing. I love it. It's a fascinating part of his story. I don't remember how much I've talked about this in my Civil War video, but for me, it's actually really cool that one of the driving points in Steve's storyline throughout the MCU has been his relationship with Bucky. But Winter Soldier also adds Sam to the mix, who I absolutely love. And their relationship is actually really awesome. Like, there's a great camaraderie between Sam and Steve, which I really appreciate. You know, they have each other's backs, they support each other, and their friendship and the dynamic that's created by their shared experience of war trauma is dramatically really fascinating. I personally perceive as quite queer-coded, actually, and a lot of others on the internet will agree with me. And I enjoy that aspect quite a lot, the idea that Steve probably is quite gay, to be fair. Not that Marvel would ever put that in a movie, but we see it. We see it. And I know there's ladies, there's Peggy Carter, there's Sharon Carter, but it all just kind of rings a little bit hollow. You know what I mean? But hey, that's not what this video is about, and you can look at this however you like. I think it's quite a big part of Steve's character, but in any case, what's interesting about these movies is that they are so linked and so necessary for our understanding of Steve, and also for the understanding of the MCU at large. Like, a lot of these changes are really quite major. And so even though, like, a lot of people say that the first Captain America film is boring, you couldn't have just the Winter Soldier as enough. The story was not complete. And if anything, I found the first Captain America film to be more interesting after having seen Winter Soldier. So if you haven't actually, like, gone back to watch the first Cap film, I'd say do it. I think it's really enriched by the knowledge we gain later on about both, like, S.H.I.E.L.D. and Hydra and the world and Steve himself. It's just so interesting to see that beginning and where he ends up. Yeah, it's really cool. So ratings-wise, if you're into that sort of thing, Captain America the First Avenger gets a solid 3 stars, but then it's knocked out of the park by Winter Soldier, which gets 5 stars because it's awesome. It's just so much fun to watch. I think I've watched it, like, a lot of times. It is the sort of film that you can go back and watch again and again, and there's bits and bobs in there that you can discover. Like, Abed's little cameo is amazing, and I love it. And yeah, that's kind of everything on the first 2 Captain America films. If you enjoyed this video, do give me a thumbs up, and you can subscribe to the channel for more Marvel goodness, and ring the notification bell as well. You can also follow me on Instagram, and yeah, I'll see you guys at the next one. Bye!